Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you guys all about discussion posts. So I got a comment, which I need to finish responding to, from somebody named Megan asking me to talk about discussion posts, and that's a wonderful idea because I've not really done that, and it's a huge part of being an English major, especially in the time of COVID where so many classes are online. So I wanted to talk about some ways that you can get better at making discussion posts. It's certainly not something that just is immediately easy. It takes some practice and getting used to, and once you kind of get the hang of it, it becomes easier to replicate discussion posts even on different topics, but it takes practice and work to get to that point where you can replicate. So from the very beginning, I would just start with reading the discussion topic, question, whatever you have to respond to before you even start reading. That way you're training your mind to start thinking about what you need to be responding to while you're reading it. I've found sometimes I do, sometimes I don't at this point because I've learned to read analytically, so that way I'm already thinking about a lot of things as I read it and then can apply those thoughts to the discussion post. But especially as you're starting out, reading the discussion post will get you to already be thinking about what you need to respond to, and you don't have to overwhelm yourself with all of the extra things that might come up while you're reading your assignment. The next thing that I would do, and it kind of ties into what I was just saying, is to read actively, to make sure you're not just reading the words and understanding what they mean, but understanding the impacts they have on the piece, how they further the theme of the piece, all sorts of things, and really just go more than just reading what's on the page and seeing what it all means, how it connects, how it makes the piece important. And one way that I think works really well to do this is through annotation. So I really like to have physical copies of books, and that way I can physically annotate. And what I mean by annotating isn't just highlighting random things or underlining random things. So one thing I tend to do is I find that I try to thematically circle or underline or highlight. So things that can kind of connect in some way, I like to keep those together based on the symbol that I use. Sometimes I star something. Sometimes it just means that this stood out to me and I haven't quite decided why yet. I just think that it's important. It feels important. Maybe it's the wording. Maybe it's the rhythm or the rhyme. Something there felt important, and I want to make sure that my attention goes back to that on a reevaluation or reanalysis. Something else I do. One thing that's great, especially with like these English literature classes, you're looking at a lot of older pieces and there's a lot of language that isn't used anymore. So I usually will make sure that I define any words that don't feel familiar to me. I especially did that when I was starting with, this English literature analysis. It's gotten easier to figure out based on context clues now that I'm more used to this older writing. But especially in the beginning, I used to look up every word that I didn't recognize, didn't know, even if it was a word I recognized but didn't seem to be used with the same definition that I understand it in. I would look up everything. Okay, so this is my AP Literature binder. It is thick, there is a lot in here, very heavy. But this is really where I started to learn annotation and deeper analysis and how to do it. So I have so much here that was so helpful to me. So I'm going to grab one of the, there's dust all over this. I'm going to grab one of the poem little packets that we had to analyze for homework. And this was just like one of the poems that I really enjoyed and still like, it has the ability to make me cry, this poem. It's called The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. It's real good. I recommend reading it. It's emotional. And basically, I'm gonna show you what it looks like when I annotate, because it's not necessarily like pretty, but it's alive. And I think that's what's so important, is seeing these documents and these works and these poems and narratives and essays and all these, they're living documents. And the author may not be alive anymore. The time period it was written in may be dead, whatever, but it's still alive because we annotate, because we analyze. So there's a couple of poems on here just because it was a whole packet, but this is what a page of my analysis looks like. I don't know if that's super focused in the viewfinder, but I mean, when I'm annotating something, there are things all over the page. And some of it, you know, is with the intention of being able to read it later. Some of the stuff I can't reread later. I can try, and then usually I'm able to figure it out based on like context of what it relates to and remembering what my thought process was. But sometimes I just need to acknowledge something that I thought of while I was reading it, and that will lead me into a discussion on it. So my professor for AP Literature taught us something called soaps. So soaps were basically a way to get specific analysis points after reading a piece. And they were really, really helpful, especially as I was starting out and I didn't have this background in analysis. I wasn't really taught how. And so it was super helpful for me to like make it more of a habit, and so that way I start to think of these things naturally when I read literature, and I don't need to physically do it. But as you're learning, this is super helpful. So it was called SOAPs, and so the first S was subject. Subject is as if you're looking at a painting of this poem or narrative or essay or whatever. What is exactly happening? The object is what kind of lays under that. What is the meaning of it? A in soaps is audience. Who is this to be read? Who should be reading this? Who does the author expect to read this? Who does the author want to read this? So P in soaps is purpose. Why is this piece been written? You want to try to go further than just like to and like a verb. To show, to inspire, to create. You want to go a little bit deeper than that, because those are really easy to find. It'll be even more beneficial if you can find something a little deeper. So, to create a connection between this and this, or to inspire this, and this. Like, what is it inspiring? What is it creating? And things like that. Because especially with literature, you can always say to create. You can always say to inspire or to make commentary. Like, what are you making commentary on? So it's just that little bit more, and it helps you understand the piece so much better and write a better discussion post. And then this last S, I can't really figure out what it stands for. It's basically saying like what point of view is it written in. So like third person omniscient, first person, rarely you'll find a second person, which is just when the piece is written in the you. Start with that. Just kind of getting yourself to create that analytical response to a piece. Then, so looking at something, like this. What am I even doing here? What's all of this, like, does it actually help? So things that that I have circled here are things that felt important to me. And so there's, it's a very strong sounding poem, this poem. And it's a very important subject. It's talking about this specific brigade of soldiers and this really just sad incident where 600 soldiers basically just were sent on this suicide mission. And so there is like this power to it, and this like, it wants to show how important it is. So I circled things that just had that energy to it. You know, I pull a lot of lines off of lines or words or phrases or couplets, whatever, and I'm either identifying, you know, like this, I said, sounds like orders, left, right, left, leader, how many left after, death, they know death is coming, things like that, that just are keeping me in that mindset and keeping me in that analysis. And then, of course, you have things like definitions of words that I want to make sure that I'm understanding the context with which these words are being used. And then the other thing I do is I go and look for literary devices. And once you're like more familiar with literary devices and their meanings and what they do and what they bring to a piece, especially poetry, it's so fun to write about them. I love writing about literary devices in poetry. Rhyme scheme, oh my god, I love to write about a rhyme scheme. You know, and it's more than just simile, metaphor, theme, things like that. Like, enjambment, that's literally where a line ends. If a line in a poem doesn't end on the end of a sentence, that's enjambment. So it's carrying over a sentence onto the next line of poetry. And what that can really do, I'm just using enjambment as an example, it emphasizes that ending word. So this poem says, half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. So that's the first sentence of the poem, but it's the first 4 lines. So we've got league, onward, death, 100, or 600 if you want to pull those as a phrase together. Those are important words. The league are these soldiers that are all moving as one unit. Onward, they're moving as an order. Death, they are onward towards death. And those 600, that identifies how many people are there. 600 of them moving as one league onward towards death. So it's one of those things that if you're not paying attention to it, it goes so easily, you don't catch it. But when you have the language for what you're looking for, it opens up a whole world of analysis that honestly I think is so much fun and is so cool. So those are the kinds of things. And listen, it doesn't happen overnight. I'm so glad I took this AP literature class because it helped me learn all of that. And I happen to have a great teacher who really helped me nurture that and helped me kind of through it. And so now by the time I'm in college, I feel so much more comfortable in that world and in that zone of analysis. Don't expect yourself to suddenly be feeling super confident about your discussion posts overnight. I recommend, you know, when you have these readings, pull up, there's so many lists online of like literary devices. When I forget the name of a literary device, I always look those up because they are great and they explain it. So if I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's this, I don't remember exactly the word, I go, I look it up and it'll define it. So I'm like, oh no, that's not quite it. What's the device I'm thinking of? And I can go find it. And as you're getting used to using them more, those lists are so helpful. I think that if you find certain elements that you get excited to write about, to analyze, it will also help your discussion post so much, and it will sound impressive to your professor because they'll see that you care. They'll see that you are engaging with the work. And that's what a lot of the discussion posts are about. It's engaging in the pieces. It's making them and keeping them living documents. So I'm going to let us move on from Charge of the Light Brigade. Another thing, it takes practice. You know, I talked about this a little bit, but it takes a lot of practice. It doesn't come overnight, and I think it's so easy to sometimes think that if we're not immediately good at something, we're just not good at it. And something like this takes time to get your brain used to reading with an analytical eye. And so there are things like using the soaps and pulling up device lists and reading the discussion posts beforehand that can help get your brain into that mindset, so when you do read, you already have your brain in that place, so it will start to do it itself and train itself to be analytical. Another thing I would do is look into other people's discussion posts. Some classes you can't read other people's until you've posted, but even then, read some other people's, see what you like in other people's, how they analyze, what feels well written to you, and when you respond to other people's, do so analyzing even their own analysis and their own post, and really looking into it and engaging with it rather than just being like, oh, I liked what you said. Because listen, some professors, that's fine with them, but it will just benefit you to really engage with other people's discussion posts and get a deeper understanding of what you're trying to do. So I hope that that was helpful. If there are any other questions about discussion posts, let me know. I think that it's a great topic to talk about, so I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please tell me if you have any other topics, anything you'd like me to discuss, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!